Good morning. My name is David Anwar. I'm the chair on the Committee on Innovation, Data and Education. It is, it's about 9:25. I would like to call the April 26, 2023 Committee on Innovation, Data and Education Analytics to order. This meeting is being held via live broadcast. Before I begin, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome all those joining us via video conference. Ask them that you observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak. Make your phone when not mute your phone when not speaking, and keep out mute your mic when not speaking. Keep background noise to minimum. Members, I like to call your name. Please announce your presence. As Chairman and President. Welcome, Wilson. Present. Richard Clemmer. Richard Clemmer.
He's had to drop, sir. We've lost him from the call.
Fred Farias. Present. Robert Guns.
Present.
Sam Tones.
Present.
Daniel Wong.
Present.
Georgia Hanger.
Present.
Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Item number 2 is consideration of possible action to approve the minutes from January 25, 2023 committee meeting. Member, do I have a motion and for the approval for the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I guess the agenda item number 2 passed. Agenda item number 3 is public testimony on agenda items relating to Committee on Innovation, Data and Education Analytics. We do not have anyone registered to testify, so we will go on to the next item. Item number 4 is consideration of possible action to approve the consent calendar. The consent calendar includes the items that can be approved without comments or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need to be more of our attention. The consent items are highlighted in gray on the agenda. Of course, any member can request that an agenda item can be added or removed from the consent calendar. We are going to vote on the consent items in 2 votes. One of the non-rule items and one of the proposed rules. Members, following are the non-rules items on the consent calendar for consideration. Agenda under 5E, report on restricted research expenditure, and 5G, consideration of possible action to approve the energy saving performance contract for Texas A&M University Science Center. Do I have anyone to remove this from the consent calendar? Any other items that anybody wants to add to the consent plan? Member, is there a motion and do I have a second?
So moved. Second.
Great. Anybody, all in say aye?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. The agenda item 5E and 5G passes. Agenda item VH1, consideration of possible action to adopt the proposed amendments to the board rule 13.101 and 13.103 and 13.109 concerning the limitation on hours eligible to be reported for formula funding for coordinating board. Does anybody want to remove this from the consent calendar? Is there any other proposal, rules, agenda item that anybody wants to add to the consent calendar? Member, is there a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Got a second, so anybody, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 5A is update on data modernization incentive initiative. Ms. Laurie Fine, Deputy Commissioner of Data Analytics Innovation, will provide presentation and will be able to answer any question. This item is only for information only. Hi.
Good morning, Chairman Anwar, Commissioner and committee members. It's a pleasure to lead off the agenda this morning with our first two items. Again, my name is Lori Fye, privileged to serve as Deputy Commissioner for Data Analytics and Innovation. And our first item is the update on the Data Modernization Initiative. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, when Commissioner Keller set out a very ambitious vision when he came to the agency, and that's continued to be our North Star. It's here on the slide in front of you. Our mission really in this effort is to be sure that we're equipping our stakeholders, internal and external, with insight and decision support information using the rich data resources of the agency. That's continued to be our objective, and the work is aligned around these three sort of other key objectives of redesigning our infrastructure, bringing it into the modern era, taking advantage of modern technology, expanding our offerings, and embedding continuous improvement so that our offerings continue to remain relevant, efficiently maintained, and important to our stakeholders. Next slide. This is a slide you've seen before also, though it continues to roll forward. This is sort of at the high level, the work that we will be doing over between now and the end of the calendar year. There are a couple of important milestones there are many important milestones, but a couple of important dates. September 30th is the expiration date of our final tranche of GEAR funds. So a number of our work streams are aimed at completion, launch, et cetera, by September 30th. So the next few months are very exciting months as the work of this initiative becomes increasingly visible, both internally at the agency and externally. I'm very excited to report this quarter that just last week we hit two very major milestones in the work. Our revised and revamped data website went into user acceptance testing with our internal team. That is a big milestone on the way to external launch. So we're very excited about that. We gathered a lot of good feedback, including from the commissioner, and we're integrating that feedback now on the way to a public launch of that data website later in the next couple of months. The other very exciting milestone is that we actually did an internal launch of the secure data portal and the privilege reports. We've talked about these some before, but when this effort is complete, we will have differentiated access to data for different types of stakeholders. So the public data website will continue to be the source for publicly appropriate and available data, but we'll have two other ways where privileged stakeholders or authorized stakeholders can come in and see finer grained information. And the first of those that has now been launched internally at the agency is the secure portal, which authenticates you and authorizes you to have access if appropriate. And then the first three reports that are being provided there, and those are reports on transfer students, persistence in graduation, and labor market outcomes. And labor market outcomes in particular was at the top of our institution stakeholders list, because that's incredibly hard data for them to get their hands on directly. And so we're very excited to be taking those into an internal review process where we'll be validating methodology, data, look and feel, all of those things. And then that's, again, another major milestone on the way to an external launch, which will happen later this summer with a select set of pilot partners. So two major milestones. Just last week, in the same week, it was a big week, and I'm still riding high from it. And I just want to pause again and say, like, that those two milestones represent literally thousands and thousands of person-hour time and dedication. And I want to thank our agency team as well as our vendor partners for their continued hard work and commitment and dedication to actually making these things so. As in technology, you work a lot of the work is behind the scenes and it's not really visible. And it's becoming visible now, and it's just very exciting and very motivating for the team. So congratulations to our whole team. And I'm very excited to come back in July and be able to tell you the next things and actually show you those things. Next slide, please. This is the more detailed slide. Again, as you may remember, this project started out as 23 discrete projects, and not all of those had to do with the technology. And so this gives you a bit more of the detail, in particular around those supporting work in governance and communications that are critically important to delivering the kind of user experience that we have in mind. So happy to answer any questions and as you review this, but we won't walk through this one in great detail. Next slide. And that concludes my update. I'm happy to take any questions. Again, this is for information only, but we're very delighted to be where we are.
Are you constantly testing kind of all the different parts to make sure they're performing as planned?
Yeah, there's a whole process, along every step of the way, there's a quality assurance and testing process. And then that really culminates in the things that you do at the end with actual users. So we've done, different types of user engagement along the way in the development of each of these components and reports. But now we're doing that on a bigger scale. And it's very exciting to be there. And you learn things, you learn something, you have something to fix at every stage. But we're excited about where we are and the things that are going to take it the next mile. And honestly, Mr. Wilson, our commitment to continuous improvement means it's never done, right? We don't ever just put a bow on it. It's done for now, and we start collecting the next set of user feedback and input, and then we make some enhancements, and then we continue that process very deliberately so that it's continually improving.
So I'm reminded of the story of the king who spent most of his wealth on a big party to show off his palace, and nobody came. And
Yeah.
I've also been reminded recently of the fact that 15% of or some percentage of our top 10% of minority students are enrolled in Loyola. So I just want to remind you and the higher ed coordinating board that this is a very powerful tool, but we've got to get it in the right hands so it will be utilized, so we can start making sure, especially these kids who don't have access or the culture of higher education, have every piece of information they need so that we can get more of them educated.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think one of the other sets of principles that undergirds the work of this initiative, as well as the work on those things that are deliberately student facing, like My Texas Future, are those principles of user-centered design. And that means I don't represent the target audience. Someone else represents the target. The target audience needs to speak for themselves, and we need to have a deliberate and disciplined way to both solicit that input and then execute on what we hear. And that's the sort of the beauty of bringing together the principles of user-centered design and the principles of continuous improvement, because you're constantly listening to your audience, and your audience is telling you what they need, what they want, how they need to consume it. We've been fortunate in this effort to be supported by our partnership with the Texas Higher Education Foundation. And what that enables us to do is take advantage of opportunities to do polling and do focus groups and do the kinds of things that really give you that rich feedback from users, or that rich input, so that you can then be sure that you're designing for what your user desires. That's also the reason that we've got the communication strand of work, because you're right, just because you build it does not mean they're coming, that they're going to knock down your doors to find it. So we're very conscious of the fact that we've got to be sure that we have to have a deliberate rollout strategy also to help people understand what we're providing, how to use it best, and how that can help them start to have the kinds of conversations on their campus that actually do result in helping students succeed.
If I can underline just a couple of points on this, because I think, yeah, no, I absolutely agree. We want to make sure that, that we're making the data useful. That it's not just that there are plenty of data websites that have beautiful charts and animation that nobody uses, honestly, to make any decisions. And you can spend a lot of time looking at those, but then is it helping folks do their jobs better? So there's sort of two key components that have to change. And I would say that it's a technical problem, but it's a cultural problem also that we have to tackle within the coordinating board as well as within the institution. So if you think about, like, historically, we brought this data in from institutions more with a regulatory purpose and mindset. And we thought about the users more as like the institutional research folks in the institutions. And there's a lot of back and forth. And then eventually, maybe a year later, a report will come out and be approved by the agency that has, where the data has been back and forth several times. And by that point, could be a year old or more. And so some of these students that didn't enroll are students who stopped out and dropped out a long time. But we have more perfect data in our regulatory report about what happened. So now what we're trying to do is say, well, let's think differently about who our users are. So there's the students and families that are making decisions about programs. And for that, we have this whole focus on advising tools in My Texas Future. So they can see here's jobs and wages and what's in demand, and find programs, get the information they need from an advising standpoint. And then within the institutions, we've got to push beyond the institutional research folks. What do the presidents and provosts need to see? What do the folks running student success programs need to see? So when you start rolling these products out, then, you know, as Lori said, there's going to have to be a lot of back and forth with the institutions where we're trying to bring other folks into the conversation that haven't really had this data at their disposal. And so when we start rolling out like a tool where you can see, here's what the flow of students looks like through your institution. Here's where students are getting hung out. Now let's break that down by race and ethnicity, let's break it down by gender. Let's break it down by income. And some of that's pretty painful data that the institutions have not had ready access to. Especially our smaller institutions haven't really had ready access to. And then that's going to change the conversation that we're having with the institution. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to start releasing these initial tools, and then it's really going to sort of amplify and accelerate this work with the institutions. But the North Star of this is not just like, well, we've got better, more interactive reports. It's that we've got to have more of the mindset of, are we providing actionable intelligence to help people make better decisions, whether we're talking students and families, or folks within institutions that are operating programs and student success programs, or maybe even like folks on boards of regents, you know, so that they have a better sense of what's happening within their system.
And I agree. I would argue, like the commissioner, that it's really the institutions that have to come to the table, because the coordinating board does data and informs the necessary needs, but the institutions need to take the ball and run with it. And they're the ones that have to recruit the students. So I think the job, in my opinion, of the coordinating board is to provide that data, not the coordinating board to out there and recruit. It's each individual institutions.
But somebody, somewhere has to provide a platform, keeping in mind, you may get one shot at a kid from a financially challenged family, and maybe it's their grandmother who's taken off from work.
Yeah.
And so somebody has to provide a utility where they can sit down with that student and say, look, if you go to school, here's what you want to major in. This is what it means for you in the future. And oh, by the way, to help you get there, here's what you can do to apply for the funds it's going to take to do that. And here's what you can expect. And here's how long it's going to take. I mean, because you're not dealing with people that have, a lot of people don't have a history of, yes, you're going to college, and yes, we can do all this research. You may get one shot, and we need to make sure we are putting something out there that's practical for people based on their circumstance.
Yeah, and that's especially for My Texas Future, that's the focus, is what's gonna speak to students and families. Like we were surprised, or I was surprised when we polled during the pandemic, folks who had some college and no credential, right? And we asked them what the barriers were. And a lot of what they told us were barriers that were more about advising. In fact, all the barriers related to advising are on the same order of magnitude as barriers related to cost. Where folks would say, well, I know I might need more education, but I don't know how it would help me get a better job, or I don't know if my credits would transfer. Or I don't know if I can find a program that would be flexible and I can't stop working. And so we've taken that then into for My Texas Future, where you can say, here are jobs, here's what's in demand, here's what the salaries are like. You can search programs. You can say, I only want to see programs within this radius of my house, or I only want to see programs that I can do online and filter it down that way. We'll see. So especially when we get into the summer, we'll bring you all the, like in the Mountain Path tool. We're going to have the ability for folks to put in the courses they've taken. And one of the options will be that they can just say, what's my quickest path to done? Like if here are the courses I've taken, I just need to get a degree. Like, so where they can sort the program by how close to done they are. So I mean, so that's a pretty unique platform tool that frankly other states don't have. And that is powered by all of this data that we're collecting, but also thanks to the partnership with the foundation, where we're focused on not just sort of here's what we'd like to tell them, but how do we present it to the kid that parent, that grandparent is going to be able to consume it and be able to know, okay, here's what I do next to take that next step.
Providing tools, that's the key.
I got a question right here. Is this platform going to help, is it on? Oh, yeah, okay. So is this platform going to help dropout students? Is it mainly for first timer or just, we have a lot of dropout students at community college, as you know, 20%, 20-some% graduation rate. So what happened to those 70%? Something is not working for them. Maybe there's still way to help them to come back to find something that can enable them to get some certification or credentials so they can lead a better life, something like that. Even college, 4-year college or 2-year college, their graduation rate is not 100%. So what happened to those dropout students? Is there any help for them?
So we'll have sort of two major products, right? So we'll have the My Texas Future platform, and within that multiple applications that are more the student facing stuff. And then the public data portal, privileged data reports that Lori's talking about, that's more the institution, where the folks within the institution will be able to see where are we losing students and and break that down. So you can see like, okay, what are our dropout rates look like for women versus men, or even like what does the debt look like, or what do the earnings look like for graduates over time? And let's break that down by race and ethnicity, that kind of thing. So they'll have much richer data so they can understand what's happening, what the profiles of their students look like, how are they navigating the programs, and what the outcomes look like. So those products, I mean, there's some of it that's public, but it's probably not going to be your typical student family that's going to go look at that as much. It's more focused on sort of policymakers and folks within institutions.
I have a question for you. How are we tying into high schools? Getting the students before they're students or before they're college students? How are we?
So two things. So one is, we are deeply tied in with the counselors and college and career advisors. And that can be the counselor, or it could be the social studies teacher who's also the college advisor. So we have the on-course academy for counselors and advisors. We've got more than 18,000 counselors and advisors who are connected to us. And we have training academy for them where they can get trained on advising students for college and careers, and advising students for FAFSA, or even applying to military academies and that kind of stuff. And then we also do webinars and we push out information. So like when they make policy decisions, so for example, like there's a discussion about expanding the armed services scholarship program. So if that moves forward, we can push that out in real time across the state to all of the college and career advisors who advise more than 95% of our middle school and high school students across the state. So to engage with their advisors, and then they send stuff out across the schools on their networks. And then we also have through the My Texas Future, where we have the sort of more direct student-facing contact where folks can explore, they create a profile and they talk about what their interests are and they can explore. And increasingly where it's going is where you'll have sort of a single sign-on across these applications. So by the end of the summer, we should have developed the new Apply Texas application that's part of My Texas Future. And we will roll that out, not 23, but in the 24 application cycle, where the idea is students explore, try to get a sense of what, the programs they might be interested in, start to develop a plan, and then within a few clicks, they can go ahead and apply to connect to those institutions so that we have a one handoff. So, so we've got connecting through the schools, the middle school and high school students, and the tools that they can use for planning. And then also where the students actually create a profile, and that's actually takes them on the first step to putting in their college application. You can create a profile, in the middle school students.
One of the things is maybe talk about shortage of counselor in high school. So how are we going to help those bridge the gap in terms of getting this tool to be able to be used by all the high school, graduating high school, and all coming. So is there any plan to do that? Because I mean, we have a great tool, just like Sam said, nobody uses it because they don't have enough counselor to really help the students do it.
Yeah, so we have asked for resources specifically around My Texas Future, and Governor Abbott did include it in his budget of what he requested. So right now, both the House and the Senate have our exceptional item requests. We asked for an additional $20 million, and both House and Senate right now have that in their budgets as they're going into conference. So we never worry enough, but it looks like we're in good shape going into conference. Also through the foundation and through like partnerships with chambers, and we are going to try to lean into marketing. We have a little bit of marketing budget that we've allocated specifically as we roll out My Texas Future this summer, and we get more information for you on what those plans are. But we were able to work like with Edelman last year in developing some customizable apps, and so it has a different feel for Midland than it does for Houston and it does for Harlingen kind of thing. And we're working on planning for a campaign. So we'll make a marketing push around it.
Members, are there any questions? If not, do I have a motion to approve amending the technology service contract pursuant to Government Code Chapter 2155 with Deloitte Consulting LLC from March 31, 2023 to.
That's next.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I got my page with me, the information only. Now about the agenda item 5B, this is consideration of possible action to approve amending the technology service contract pursuant to Government Code Chapter 2155 with Deloitte Consulting LLC from March 31, 2023 to August 31st, 2023 at a cost not to exceed 1.5 million. Mr. Lori Payne, Deputy Commissioner for Data Analysis and Innovation, will provide a presentation and will be available to answer any questions.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members. Lori Fye, Deputy Commissioner for Data Analytics and Innovation, bringing you this item for your consideration. As background, in October of 2022, the coordinating board entered into a contract with Deloitte Consulting to complete the development and launch of two key components of the agency's data modernization initiative: the secure data portal and privileged reports, which we were just talking about, and the secure data enclave. This work continues to progress, and as we just said, had major milestone last week. And that's obviously an accomplishment that we're very excited about and is made possible by a strong partnership with our vendor, which continues to be productive. The original contract for up to $2.5 million was approved by the commissioner with board notification according to Rule 1.16. So you may not remember back in the fall of last year, but that we went through that process. This requested extension of up to $1.5 million with an extension through August will allow additional work to be completed that launches the secure data enclave and continued supported enhancements, some of those user enhancements that we were just talking about for the secure portal and the privileged reports. Staff recommends approval of this extension to complete and launch these components, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So Ms. Fine, my question is, when we approve this, since we're past March 23rd, right? We're in April. Is there anything contingency, this may be for general counsel and Nicole, on the plan when we approve it, if it takes extensions, is this the proper come back to the board? Is that why we're doing this?
Yes, because it will extend the contract. Can't remember which one it the 10%. Yeah, that it increased the amount by more than 10% and needed to come back to the board for approval
Versus the
versus the time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Members, are there any questions? If not, do I have a motion to approve amending the technology service contract pursuant to Government Code Chapter 2155 with Deloitte Consulting LLC from March 31, 2023 to August 31, 2023 at the cost not to exceed $1,500,000. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, motion 5B passes. We move on to 5C, is consideration and possible action to adopt the recommendation relating to the certification of gifts that are fundable through the Texas Research Incentive Program, TRIP, for Emerging Research University. Ms. Emily, I'm sorry, Mr. Assistant Commissioner for Funding will present this item and will be available for request.
Good morning, Emily Cormier, Assistant Commissioner for Funding, and as mentioned, I'm here to bring forward the next round of gifts available for certification by the board for the Texas Research Incentive Program, or TRIP. Moving to the next slide. So the TRIP was established in 2009 by the Texas legislature to really incentivize universities to seek private donations and gifts to help support their research endeavors. To support this goal, the program provides state matching funds for private donations made to institutions for research. Gifts are matched through a tiered system where the state dollars increase as the gift amount increases. Gifts must be at least $100,000 to be matched, and the match tops out at $10 million. Only emerging research universities are eligible to receive funds through this program, and listed on the right side of the screen are the 8 universities who are eligible. Moving to the next slide. So since 2010, the program's brought in over almost $1 billion in eligible gifts provided to institutions. So this would equate to about $750 million in matching state dollars to be paid to the institutions for these gifts. And as you can see here, over time, the legislature's made a considerable investment in this program. So almost $300 million has been provided to institutions since 2010. Given that, though, the pace of appropriations by the legislature has not kept up with gift giving. So there is a current backlog of approximately $350 million in available gifts to be matched by the state. So if we move to the next slide.
What happened to 2016, actually?
So in 2016, they did make a significant appropriation to try and clear the backlog. So at that point in time. And since then, there's been a leveling off of appropriations. So for this round, we're bringing forward 49.8 million in eligible gifts made to institutions, which would be state matching funds of 42 million for your approval. So that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions.
And my question's a general question, not specific to the gifts, but how does an institution that's not on that list become an institution on that list?
So to be eligible, you have to be considered an emerging research university as defined by our accountability system. And so that undergoes a review every few years. And so generally, you're supposed to be really providing, awarding a certain amount of PhD degrees annually, offering a comprehensive range of undergraduate and graduate programs, and generating a certain, level of research funding.
So any school, meet those criteria can be put on this list, is it correct?
Could become an emerging
Should become,
research.
so they would need to apply to this board in order to be able to put on the list, is it correct? What's the process actually?
So I believe every couple years, there's a review of the accountability system groupings. It's called the peer groups. So the way we organize our universities in the state are there's research universities, which right now are UT and A&M. There are these 8 emerging research universities, and then there's a few other peer groups below that. So my understanding is every couple of years, those are reviewed and to see if somebody should be moving between the peer groups.
I know this is kind of perfunctory, but the legislature is looking with TRIP and making changes, but I know that doesn't affect what you're presenting today, but I'm just kind of curious about that, Commissioner, you want to comment?
This would be one of the issues that hear more and less about during the session. I mean, so the backlog, what that means is that for the donors, they give gifts. In many cases, understanding that there was going to be this match that was going to be available from the state. State appropriations haven't kept up with the commitments and the donations, and so the 350 million was owed to the institutions, and also would match what the donors in many cases understood what was going to happen. And if they gave this gift, then the trade would amplify their gift. So we shared the information with the appropriators. Of course, they're going into conference now. We're hopeful that in the final package that they would pay off. It's a one-time appropriation to pay off that balance. They have had some conversation about changing the structure of the program.
That they're a long way from finishing. So if they were gonna get
Legislative Budget Board and the Governor's Office each year. This is to provide an overall financial assessment of the 50 community colleges in the state. And this uses ratios from KPMG for the assessment, and we use the data submitted to us from institutions' annual financial reports. Generally, we're trying to summarize large amounts of financial data and some standard metrics just to look at statewide and individual colleges' results. So the Composite Financial Index, or CFI, is used as the overall measure for financial health. The metric blends ratios into one number so we can have a balanced view of an institution's finances. And the results for this year show a strong statewide composite financial index. This continues the recent trend of favorable results from this report, which is likely due to the influx of federal dollars that the state has received over the past few fiscal years. At the statewide level, we're well above industry standards for each of the metrics. And for individual colleges, we see similar strong results, and almost all reporting colleges have met the industry standard for CFI. Across all of the financial metrics reviewed, only one college out of the 50 has indicated as being under financial stress. So that concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Do I have any questions, please? If not, do I have a motion to approve the commissioner's recommendation relating to the annual report about the financial condition of the state's community college districts? Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item 5G was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5H. 5H. 1 through 4. The proposed rule, agenda item 5H1 was approved on the consent calendar. 5H2 is consideration of possible action to amend board rules 2021 concerning definition. Dr. Charles Control, Assistant Commissioner for Student Financial Aid Program, will present this item and be available to any questions, please.
Thank you. You got my name right, so I appreciate it. The first rule that I'm presenting to you is actually a small change to a definition within the student financial aid programs, but it has a very wide impact. It's changing the definition of expected family contribution. The reason that we're needing to change the definition is because the federal government has changed their structure for how they calculate the expected financial family contribution, and they've also changed the name to the Student Aid Index. Because expected family contribution appears so many places in statute and in rule, what we did was we have defined expected family contribution as being the appropriate federal formula for determining a family's contribution. This was, in my mind, an excellent example of the rulemaking process. Once we posted the rule, a group of financial aid officers from different institutions reached out to understand the goal and intent of our rulemaking. And once we discussed it, they actually offered up alternate language that would be better understood by the financial aid community. The language that they offered met the intent that we were trying to achieve. And so we are using their suggested language so that it will be best understood by the stakeholders that need to implement this. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about this proposed rule.
So we're changing the language and the title.
We're continuing to use the word expected family contribution because that phrase is in statute. And we're changing the definition to be a measure that's utilized to calculate a student's financial need as regulated and defined by the methodology used for federal student financial aid. That way, if the federal government ever tries to change the name again, we're already in place and ready for any future name changes.
Thank you.
Members, are there any more questions? If not, Your motion to approve amendment to the board rule 22.1 concerning definition. I have a motion and a second, please.
So
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Agenda item 5H, consideration and possible action to amend board rule 22.22 through 22.24 and 22.26 through 22.30 concerning the tuition equalization grant program. Dr. Charles Consider, Assistant Commissioner for Student Financial Aid, will present this item and be available for any question.
Thank you. So the second rule that I'm bringing you today is in regards to the tuition equalization grant program. The tuition equalization grant program has a component called exceptional financial need. And what it does is it allows institutions to award a larger grant to students that are demonstrating this exceptional financial need. The exceptional financial need is actually tied to their expected family contribution. And the number, the expected family contribution amount that qualifies you as having exceptional financial need was set in rule 10 years ago and hasn't been changed since. And so even as things have evolved in the financial calculations and in terms of the amount of need that exists within the student population, there hasn't been an ability for institutions to help these students to a greater level. And so what we did was we convened a negotiated rulemaking committee to discuss what would be an appropriate determination of exceptional financial need. We had to use the negotiated rulemaking process because the number of students that qualify for exceptional financial need impacts the allocation of funding that each institution receives. And whenever we're going to do anything that impacts allocations, we need to engage in the negotiated rulemaking process. So the negotiated rulemaking committee reached consensus on a determination of exceptional financial need that is actually tied to federal calculations for the federal Pell Grant program. And by doing that, what it will allow is that the definite or the determining factor for exceptional financial aid, for an exceptional financial need, will automatically adjust over the years as the determining factor for Pell Grant eligibility adjusts. So we're building in the ability to not have to come back to you to change this rule on a regular basis. We also did some cleanup of other language since we had the negotiated rulemaking committee, but that was very much just clarifying intent and things like that. And I'm sorry, I've lost it. There was one other thing I wanted to tell you, but it's gone. So hopefully I've told you enough as to what it is that you need to know to feel comfortable approving this.
Did we receive a lot of comments?
We received no comments. So the affected institutions were well represented on the negotiated rulemaking committee. And the other private institutions seem to have agreed with the consensus that they came to.
So basically just indexes the criteria based on Pell Grant, so we don't have to go revisit all the time to adjust it for inflation.
Yes, exactly. And I remembered the thing I was going to tell you, which was simply that this allows the institutions to have a much greater flexibility in how they use the funds, and it'll allow them to be able to target funds to more students that they feel are most needy.
Remember that. Are there any more questions? If not, do I have a motion to approve amending the board rule 22.22 to 22.24 and 22.26 to 22.30 concerning the tuition equalization grant program? Do I have a motion in the second case?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 5H4 is consideration and possible action to amend board rule 22.49 concerning the Hinson Hazelwood College Student Loan Program. Dr. Charles Contor, Assistant Commissioner for State Student Financial Aid Program, will present this item and be available for any question, please.
Thank you. So the final rule that I'm bringing to you today is in regards to how much a student can borrow through our College Access Loan Program. And you may remember from the special called board meeting in December that we created the Forward Loan Program. And in that program, we set out standards that limit how much a student can borrow through the Forward Loan Program in relation to their overall borrowing. And so we look at their manageable debt. So looking to make sure that the loans that we provide through our loan programs at the agency don't put the student into a situation where their total debt is beyond the manageable level. And we define manageable as the ability to pay off that student debt over a 10-year period using no more than 10% of their income. We did that for the Forward Loan Program. And what this rule would do is to implement that for the College Access Loan Program. So beginning in September, on September 1st, any applications received on or after September 1st, we would do the same review. What's your total debt level? Is the amount you're looking to borrow through the College Access Loan going to put you at an unmanageable debt level? If so, then the agency isn't going to be an organization that provides them with debt that puts them over that level. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So I have a question on, are we keeping data on information from students, people that are not meeting what they would like, their expectations? And what kind of feedback do we have so far since the December meeting?
We actually are still, if the computer system worked right last night, we actually have our first forward loan that's gone through and been approved. But it's not approved or it's approved, but it's for this coming academic year. So we haven't actually had enough activity in the Forward Loan Program for us to really be able to assess the pieces of it. So we will continue to monitor that program and any feedback that we get and continue to provide information accordingly.
So do we have information or data on students that are not meeting the criteria? What kind of feedback are we getting?
Not meeting the criteria in the Forward Loan Program in terms of the total debt or just in terms of the general eligibility?
Total eligibility.
The total eligibility. We don't have any specific feedback yet on that program. The timing of the launch of the program, just in relation to how technology projects work and, you know, needing to do the rules, et cetera, is such that when we brought the program online, many students had already kind of navigated how they were going to cover the costs for the spring term. So we don't expect to see significant activity in the Forward Loan Program until this spring, when they start to apply for the coming academic year. So we expect to learn much more about it as we head into May, June. And one of the things that we intend to do, and is in the rules for the Forward Loan Program, is that we will on a regular basis revisit the concepts of what are high demand fields, what are appropriate fields to be eligible for the forward loan. And so that kind of feedback, as we see, like if we're seeing significant numbers of applicants who aren't eligible because they're in particular fields, we can look to see, is that a high demand field that we're not meeting? So, thank you.
Just to chime in on one additional point about the forward loans is that the way that we put the programs together is they can use those for short-term workforce credentials as well as traditional degree certificate programs. And in the new proposed community college finance system, there are also incentives for the community colleges that are tied to the production of these even short-term credentials with additional funding if they're in these high areas. So Council 8 passes, it seems to be on the trajectory that what that will do is it will realign the incentives for community colleges. So we have, so we'll have additional TEOG dollars and financial aid that we can provide students in community colleges, as well as the forward loans that are really focused on high demand programs, and then you'll have aligned the incentives with the funding mechanisms for the community colleges. And of course, a lot of how those parameters are going to be set and making sure that all of these things line up is going to be the responsibility of the coordinating board. So we're going to be coming back to the board on ruling to make sure that all of these programs and financial aid and what we're doing on the finance side for community colleges are all aligned in the combination.
I think that's kind of the reason for my question, because the commissioner, thank you for explaining that to the board, because I think it's going to be a big role for the coordinating board moving forward when this legislation passes. And it looks like it's in good shape so far. But it's going to be a big responsibility for this board to be able to manage that, which we've not done before. So that'll be a little bit more responsibility. So the board needs to be aware of that, which is a good thing.
One thing we are doing with the forward loan is we are just about to launch a social media campaign to get the word out more and do our best to create awareness through outreach to help more of these students know that the opportunity is available.
I have a quick question on the 10-year and the 10%. I'm curious if you stress tested an extended duration to 15, just a question to watch. And in the static number of 10%, income levels are significantly different. At 50,000 versus only making 100. Does an absolute dollar amount make more sense? And how are y'all thinking through how many people are going to get missed by the 10%?
And that, I was gonna, Robert, I'm glad you brought that up because that was my initial question, is that I think people are going to be surprised, and I'm concerned about people being upset or surprised with decisions not meeting their expectations. And I want to make sure that the staff and everybody is prepared for those possible issues.
So we did run some different scenarios, and we'll kind of continue to dig into this as we get more data. We'll have a lot more data that will come in because of the community college communities work on the workforce programs. So we did an ad hoc data request from the community colleges so that we could do some initial models and estimates. But they're on programs that have typically been offered on the continuing education side, professional education side. We really didn't have any data on a lot of those programs. And frankly, many of the colleges aren't even really tracking central. So over this next year, we'll be able to bring in additional data and also connect those to the individual student records so that we can dig into that more. Just on the preliminary estimates is that most of these workforce programs and in general, the programs at the public institutions are going to be, the students shouldn't feel too much pressure there because of where we're setting these limits. I think that where it's going to be bigger potential issue is going to be with the independent institutions. That's where you tend to see students taking out much higher debt loads from the college access loans. And so depending on their program, that's where that's where you're doing more of these constraints. And because we have students can borrow right now up to the cost of attendance regardless of what the program is. And so if you're at an independent college where just tuition could be $40,000 to $50,000, then then students could take on pretty significant debt. And so that to Chad's point, and the principle is that we want to try to provide better information to students, to their advisors, but also we don't really want to be a party to students taking up more debt, then that drives our defaults and when students are able to repay these loans.
Quick question, could you quickly go through the criteria for determining eligibility?
For a college access loan, the college access loan criteria are pretty straightforward. You need to be enrolled in a program, educational program, a degree or certificate program at one of our public or private institutions. You have to be a resident of Texas. And you also need to pass a credit check. And you can pass the credit check by, sorry, I'm starting to echo there. You can pass the credit check with a cosigner in the process if necessary. But the college access loan has some very straightforward eligibility criteria. The forward loan has the extra criteria of looking at what program are you in? Is it within, is it a high demand program? Things like that.
And when we say high demand program, does that include earning potential for that program or?
That's one of the factors. So say for the forward loan program, the programs we started with, and as I mentioned, the plan is to continually assess whether other programs need to be included. But we included with that technology programs, supply chain, nursing, education, and a fifth one that's just not coming to mind at the moment. But hopefully, like the other piece, it'll come into my mind in a second. But we looked at those kind of as our first cuts of what are the high demand. And really the idea with the forward loan program, very specifically, is wanting to make sure that we're creating a program where individuals who participate, we've got a structure in place for them to succeed in repaying the loan. Like ultimately, that's our goal, is we want to make sure that the supports are there. One of the supports is looking at how much they can borrow. So kind of at the start of the process. For the forward loan program, we have other supports after they've graduated. Because we look at their income in terms of how much they're expected to repay. And we have structures in place such that if they do hit a snag in their earnings, that they're, haven't quite made it into the job they're looking for, and their income is below what we would call kind of a reasonable wage, then we've got things to put them in place so that they can have a temporary forbearance on their accounts, so that they can just pay interest until they get to the point of having a larger income. So the forward loan has several pieces in place to really help ensure the success, that if you're eligible for that program, you're going to be able to repay this loan because of the career you're going into, because of the structure we have in place. For the college access loan, this starts to put some of those elements in place so that at least we've got that first piece of the puzzle. Let's look at your total borrowing and let's make sure that you're not setting yourself up for the challenge of repaying afterwards.
Are there any more questions? If not, I would like to have a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Agenda item 6 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn in a second, please?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed, say no. Any opposed, no. I guess
So is this,
this committee meeting came to adjournment. We have, we will now take a short break to allow staff to set up for the committee on